Hey folks, before we get to the episode, I want to invite you to this month's International Directors Meetup, our monthly gathering of directors and theater makers from around the world. It's a space to share experiences, trade advice, and find support in what can often be a pretty isolating role. You can come and go as you need, drop in late, leave early, whatever fits your schedule. It's simply a chance to set aside time each month to sit alongside others who understand the work. For dates, times, and details, head to boardofdirectors.world and pull up a chair at the table. Join the board. There's a saying that started circulating by the time my class left Columbia. We came for Anne, we stayed for Brian. Brian Kulick was my teacher, my mentor, and without question the single biggest influence on who I am as a director and how I teach directing. And I don't say that lightly. I say it directly to him in this conversation. Brian is an artist who doesn't just teach you how to make work. He teaches you how to think about text, about power, about curiosity, about responsibility, about the difference between having an answer and asking a real question. His rooms were never about technique for technique's sake. They were about attention, rigor, and the courage to stay inside complexity without rushing to resolve it. Brian has directed widely, led institutions, written books that many of us quietly keep within arm's reach, and shaped generations of artists through his teaching. But what I wanted here was not a greatest hits conversation. I wanted something closer to the way he actually works. Socratic, precise, generous, occasionally unsettling, and deeply alive to the contradictions of making art now. This is a conversation for directors, for people who care about how rooms function, how meaning is made, and how we remain curious over a lifetime. It's about forests and trees, about resisting rigid methodologies, about reading texts until they start reading you back. It was a privilege to sit across from my teacher as a peer and to think alongside him again. This is my conversation with Brian Kulick. So, Brian, I'm going to say something that you will probably brush off and laugh about, but you've been the most influential teacher in my life. And the way that I teach, the way that I direct is really shaped by how you taught me. When you think about teaching directors now, what do you believe is actually teachable, and what do you think is actually experience?
Wow. Well, first of all, Adam, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. That's the words that every teacher wants to hear, of course, right? It's exactly what you just said. So thank you. That's very kind of you. And you were an extraordinary student. One of the great things about teaching is that a lot of times the teacher learns just as much as the student. And that has very much been my experience at Columbia University. In terms of the teachability of directing, there are craft things, that you can pass on, that anyone can learn. There are certain things that, if you're a listener, if you're kind, if you are other directed, that helps tremendously. But I think the thing that really distinguishes directors, the directors that I get excited about, is the kind of questions that they cultivate and the kinds of questions that they ask themselves, they ask their collaborators, and they ultimately ask their audiences. And, different directors develop different kinds of questions, and some questions are so rich, you can live with that question for your whole life. You might, and it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to every production answer the question, because some questions are just not answerable, or they have 1,000 possible answers.
Yeah.
And each time you're just chipping away, trying to get closer and closer to that. So I think when I try to teach, what I'm curious about is what the director is curious about. What excites them, what frightens them. That's one of my favorite questions. It's something that Carol Churchill used to ask when she was working with young people in making plays for joint stock. She was working with like 9-year-olds, and she asked, "What frightens you?" And she made a whole show about what frightens you. I think a lot now that's my question. What frightens me? It's a long list.
Especially now. It just gets longer and longer.
Yeah.
Recently had Karim Fahmy on the podcast,
Yes.
and he said that he's not an ideas-driven director. He didn't say emotion-driven director, but he really is interested in relationship or the story that happens in between those two people. Can you identify, I don't want to put you on the spot and say, like, are there these categories of directors, but at least with yourself, what kind of director or what work interests you the most? What do you keep continuously get drawn to? I think I am an ideas-driven director, and where I do struggle is maybe the space in between, or maybe I create worlds, but maybe I don't focus on details. In its strength is also its weakness as well. Can you identify for yourself, or can you identify in other directors like, oh, they're this type of director, they would do well with X?
I mean, I think for myself, directing breaks down into two types, two big types. There are, it's sort of the forest and the trees. What do you see?
Mm-hmm.
Do you see the forest or do you see the trees? And so to me, there are forest directors who get an aerial view of the entire totality of something. They're forest directors, and then there are tree directors who are very alive to each individual sapling, every individual tree, and how it all connects together. And so, when you're talking about Kareem, I would say Kareem is a tree director. When you're talking about yourself, I would say you're a forest director. And what's important is to maybe identify, oh, I am a forest director. Name yourself, or oh, I am a tree director. No shame in either category. But then I think part of the issue becomes, how as a forest director can I concentrate on the trees? How as a tree director can I concentrate on the forest? Because I think these two are always in dialogue with one another. And I think ultimately, as I get older, I get less and less enchanted with binaries, with either ors, and I get more and more passionate with and both. Why not both? Why can't you be both forest and trees? Why can't you go back and forth between those two vantage points? And so that's in my life, I would say that I tend towards forests, but I've worked the rest of my life to try to get in touch with and hug those trees.
Which is this analogy, of course, which is why I love you so much, because I've been trying to search for, I'm teaching in an undergraduate institution, and of course, there are fundamentals that every director needs to handle, but at the same time, I am trying to honor the individuality of that director as well. And this analogy really solidifies what I've been thinking about, of going like, right, okay, so this is the thing. You're a forest director. So you're trying to be a tree director, and you're batting your head against the wall and really frustrated why you're not a tree director. Don't be a tree director, be a forest director. And that really kind of exemplifies not only your teaching, but your writing as well, which is you don't subscribe to any technique, and you resist it in a lot of ways. And I'm curious, what is it that you're actually trying to cultivate in the director before they start worrying about staging? I mean, you said the big question, which I think is such a huge thing, the why of why we do this. And if I'm thinking of the progression that we had at Columbia, like, I can see things that we were picking up along the way. And I certainly struggled with staging, and the Tartuffe section, I hated every minute of it, but I loved it when we got into the Goethe sections. But what is it that you are ultimately trying to cultivate so that a tree director and a forest director come out of there stronger than they've ever been before?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I think the reason I resist I love methodologies. I just don't want to be married to one. I want to be able to be polygamous. I want to be able to have a relationship with Stanislavski and with Brecht and Artaud. I want it all. And I don't want to have to be tethered to something, because I think reality is just too damn complicated. Reality is too dense. It's much more. It is political, like Bertolt says. It is psychological, like Stanislavski says. It is poetic, like Michael Chekhov says. It is mysterious and violent, like Artaud says. It's all those things. So the trick is how to access those aspects of existence as a director and help a company of actors realize that. And sometimes, so to me, directing is assembling a toolkit, and there are tools that Bertolt Brecht spends his whole life using that are immensely helpful, as are Stanislavski. And I don't think there's any problem in switching tools to get at what you need to, because a great play, whether it's by Aeschylus or Susan Roy Parks, is going to require different tools because they're in touch with something deep that's happening in the human experience. So that's one of the reasons why I get a little antsy with directors and concepts. I love things that aren't real because I don't think reality exists. I mean, I think it's an agreed upon thing. We all agree, but that could could really change really quickly. So I guess what I'm saying is that I don't, how would I put it? I just, a concept is too reductive. It makes things too simple. And what it does is a concept by its very nature excludes things. So when you say I'm conceptualizing this, you have to reconcile that you are excluding other things for that one thing. Now, once you cop up to that, once you fess up to that, then you can start to include more things into your concept. But to just be beholden to a concept in and of itself, reality doesn't work that way because reality isn't reality. Existence doesn't work neatly. It's a mess. And so at some point, how much mess can you embrace as an artist? How close can you get to the density of being is what I'm intrigued with. So I please don't misunderstand me. I love seeing a play that is suddenly set in a different time or a different place, or I love that. I love not being in a living room when you're supposed to be in a living room. I just think sometimes a concept puts the cart before the horse.
And I'm thinking now really specifically about the exegetic versus eisegetic reading of a text, where you talk very brilliantly, and I'm very influenced by the literal translation, where you're going to be a Ninagawa or you're going to be a Jonathan Miller doing it exactly historically period specific, versus a kind of a Brook director, which is anytime, any place, metaphor, allegory. And then what you're talking maybe concept wise is the Peter Sellers. I'm going to place it very specifically in this time period because it's a comparative approach of like we will understand Don Juan if we put it at Trump Tower in 1984. But at the same time, so much of your career has been spent in the classics, and of everything that I've seen, I've never seen your work be a museum piece, which is thankfully lovely. Where do you feel like you fall in, or where do you feel like you're gravitating towards, so that it doesn't become beholden to the concept, but at the same time is not floating in the breeze of the ether of not coming down on something as well?
Sure. I mean, I grew up a Jewish kid, and in Hebrew school, you have to learn about four different types of reading experiences. There's a kind of literal, what did it mean to the people who wrote or read this in their own time? There's a kind of allegorical, what were they really trying to say underneath that? There's an analogical, what is that like if you tried to translate it in a different way? And then there's a very irrational, avant-garde, metaphysical, sacred reading where it's like it's that each word has a number and it suggests blah blah blah, and it's much more Cagean. It's much more like John Cage, where you allow randomness. I open the book and I put my finger on a word, and then that gives me the whole meaning for the work. Is in a certain way as interesting and significant as knowing the origin and etymology of that word. So now the rabbis, and also this is also a practice, a hermeneutic practice that's done by the church, by rabbis, and it also is a beautiful practice in the Islamic tradition as well. Very, very sophisticated, by the way, in the Islamic tradition. But in all three traditions, they do not favor one reading over another. They say you need all four. You need all four. And so for me, the first question of a text is to try to read it in those four ways. Read it in a literal, what did it mean during this period of time? Read it as an allegory, what was it secretly trying to say? Read it as an analog, how would this relate to me today? And read it as something like a dream or irrational or magical. And once I move my way through those four readings, I sort of end up having a 360-degree I believe, I don't know if it's true. I would like to believe that having done all that work, I arrive at a more aerial view, a 360-degree view of the whole Megillah, and can start work from there. I always like to think of like when I do a play, I always like to think like, what would happen if I try to direct, like I read this play and I fell asleep and I had a dream about the play. So I always try to direct the dream of the play instead of the play itself.
I think you told a story about Patrice Chéreau going to bed and having eaten a corned beef sandwich and then had the fever dream of what his Wagner ring cycle was going to look like, that he directed it as if it was a corned beef fever dream or something like that. And that always stuck with me.
I love that. I don't know. I don't remember saying that, but I love that I said that, or that you remember me saying that.
Yeah.
But there is a wonderful quote by a French surrealist poet whose name escapes me. It might be Patrice Chéreau, although he's a director, where he used to hang a sign on his door at night, and it said, "Quiet, poet is working," which is basically he's asleep, and the best work happens, a lot of our best work happens when we're asleep.
But to keep on this topic for just a second, to keep going with the resisting technique thing, do you find one that you are naturally gravitating toward and you have to kind of like slap your hand and remind yourself, don't just rely on that. The natural inclination is X. Can I put obstructions in the way to where I don't fall into my instinctual trap?
Yes. I mean, I think, yes. I mean, ultimately, I think we gravitate towards one of those readings, similar like to the trees in the forest. We gravitate towards this. We're a certain kind of reader. We're a certain kind of receptor. We respond to things a certain way. Some of us respond to things in a political way. Some of us respond to them in a sacred way. And that's a great gift, to have that ability. But then the responsibility is, I think, to take that gift and put it in dialogue with other voices, with other points of view. And to not that all four are going to be equal, but that there's one that is informed by the other three. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I get that. Totally get that. I think I know that I still struggle with one of the readings for sure. And I'm constantly kind of moving past it. And I think it was Peter Sellers that said that he tries to direct from that obscure Shakespeare passage, the one that everybody tries to cut. I'm thinking of the Winter's Tale, the passage about the carnations in Act 4, where
I got that and got in a lot of trouble. Yeah.
but he said he tries to direct from that place. And when I was directing Winter's Tale, I was like, okay, I'm going to cut this. What is this about? And I understand what that passage is. And it's a beautiful passage about, are we the result of our genetics, or are we the result of our upbringing, meaning, like cultivating? And it's great. It's going to get completely lost on an audience. I'm sure it was lost on an audience then. It's probably lost on an audience now, which is why we continue to cut it. But to look at a passage and say, like, I'm going to be very literalist with this as well, that's where I'm always kind of glossing over, and I could be far better about that. There's not a question in there. There's just me rambling about something that I'm still working on.
No. Wonderful. It's a wonderful conundrum that you're circling around, which is what does the audience get out of all this work? Do they actually see this reading that the director and the acting company is doing, or are they just enjoying the story? If you polled everyone when they walked out of the show, would they be able to read your mind and say, Adam was thinking this? And the answer is no. The answer is no, they won't, and some might, but most of the time, maybe not. The thing is, it's those thoughts that give depth and ballast to a production. So one of my favorite analogies is about Billy Wilder and Erich von Stroheim, both German directors, and Billy Wilder was directing his first movie, and Erich von Stroheim was in it, and he had to play one of these sort of field marshals like Rommel in the desert, and he had his whole uniform, and he had an umbrella, he had a binocular case, and he came up to Billy Wilder before the shot, and he said, Billy, there's no binoculars in my binocular case. And Billy Wilder, it's his first day directing, he goes, Eric, does it say in the script you open the binocular case? He goes, no. Does it say in the script that you use the binoculars? He says, no. He goes, then you don't need the binoculars, Eric. Leave me alone. This is my first day directing. Leave me alone. So he shoots the thing, and later on he's watching the dailies, and he sees that the binocular case swings about as if there's nothing in it, and it looks completely phony. And that's what von Stroheim was trying to say: is it doesn't matter if the audience sees or doesn't see the binocular case; they'll know when it's empty. Production has to be filled with something. It has to be endowed with something. and the and you can fill the binocular case with all sorts of different binoculars, but that's part of our job. That's why we keep going back to Hamlet. It's like, who is that guy? What binocular is inside him? He's a case for something. What's inside him? And it can change from generation to generation.
Yeah, we had on the podcast Indian director Suman Mukhopadhyay, who was talking about he was born in the theater. His family had a traveling
Yes,
theater.
yes, yes.
So from 3 years old, he was on stage, and he was talking about that they would sing this Bengali song his entire life. And so he could actually track the changes of time and understanding of the audience, because where they would laugh changed over the years based on the understanding of, or the political leanings of, or the cultural understandings of where that song was. And he said, I could write a whole, history of Bengali theater off of that one song. To
Mhm.
where, to be or not to be, where are we actually listening? Beyond the first, two lines that are the famous ones, where are we actually listening is where society is actually at in that moment.
Absolutely.
And, the what is it, the Natya Sastra um, the theater's there to entertain the drunk, to answer why we're here, and to answer how do we get along. And so maybe that passage is just there for the people who will understand that. And then in the meantime, you're trying to entertain the drunk. And at the other side, society's trying to figure out how do we get along. All those three need to be there. Otherwise, there's the binocular case of going, huh, I don't know. Okay. That's helpful.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
That's
yeah.
very helpful.
Brooks says that plays are like planets. They orbit around us, and at certain points in their orbit, they're closer to us and they're more distant. So a play like Othello can feel very, very distant, and then suddenly, when it can become very, very, very close to us. And so part of what Brooke was saying is, a director needs to be sensitive to, is this the right moment? Or not, I think, in other words, things are both timely and timeless, but they really connect when the timely and the timeless converge. And so when I directed, the first time I directed the Oresteia, the messenger speech, where the messenger comes in and says, we were told not to screw around with these temples, and we screwed around with them, and then we got screwed. We got just totally. The audience was like bored to tears, bored to tears. But then I did the same play, same production several years later, same speech, a different actor, but the audience was riveted because we had just started a war with Iraq. And the
Mm-hmm.
idea of, like, what are we doing and what are the consequences of what we're doing? What kind of karma are we, putting out and getting back, became very loud. And that speech more, so one, just by the change of historical circumstances, a speech that put everyone to sleep suddenly put everyone on the edge of their seat.
Okay. Bear with me here as I try to ask this question, because I've asked this question probably to you before and to many other people's, and I'm never, it's not that I'm not satisfied with what people are saying, it's just not getting through this thick skull for me to accept it. Theater is the slowest of the arts. We're the slowest to respond to current events, historical events, but also in terms of like what theater looks like. I keep saying that, like, if Stanislavski were to come back, he'd mostly recognize what we're doing. But if, any artist from that same time period, dancer, musician, came and listened to the music, they would be flabbergasted at what's happened. So using this analogy, this Oresteia, same play, basically same speech. I know new translation, but how can we speak to the moment that we are in if we've got to have the long process of getting there without, we want to have the quality that we want to come and take in. Like, I could go on the street right now and do something and respond to this moment, but it's going to be, whatever it's going to be. How I'm asking this question like there's going to be an answer that I'm going to accept. How do we speak to a moment now when the now is always? There's never a time that we're constantly in a new now, a new now, a new now. Like, there's never a time to kind of rest and wait. And so by the time we're finished with a project, we've moved on. Or in a case like this, you can just grab the zeitgeist of we're in a war. But did you start working on that project with that idea in mind, or did it just happen to be in the air that night? I don't know I don't know what work to choose to make and how to speak to a moment that doesn't feel like, you missed it. I don't know what the question is
Sure.
there. I'm just
Yeah.
griping.
No. No. I think. Well, I don't know if I understand what you're saying about theater being slow, which is kind of wonderful. But I also think theater can be really fast too. And my friends who are in film are always envious of the theater because we're making something and it happens in like a 3 month time. That of course breaks my heart that we have to do something within, like 4 weeks of rehearsal, 5 weeks of rehearsal. Breaks my heart. But they're absolutely fascinated by that
Yeah.
because they'll make a film and it will take maybe 2 3 years to complete from the moment of
Yeah.
inception to,
Yeah.
and sometimes they'll film the damn thing, edit the damn thing, and it won't be released for another year, and the whole zeitgeist has changed, and their film is irrelevant. So there's
Uh,
something about theater is that you can do a play, that seemingly has nothing to do with the moment, but it's always going to be about the moment. It'll just be either really loud or you'll have to really lean in to try to figure it out. But we're always, by making things, the fact that we are in the world we are right now in, every theater maker is in conversation with the world we're in now, even if they're dealing with a play that's 2,500 years old. And the audience is going to come at it with that point of view. So I think you can't, again, I think it's an and both situation. There are things that are going to be kind of like, I don't get that. And there are things that are like, oh, that is so close to what's happening now, even if it was never intended to be that way. We can't ever escape. It's the hermeneutic circle. We can't ever escape who we are and where we are in this moment in time. It infects everything we do. Um, and that's a good thing and a dangerous thing and an interesting thing.
yeah. I'm still not getting it through my thick head.
No, don't, don't ever get it. Just keep banging the head. I think that's a good
Okay.
thing.
Okay. All right. Well, if you approve, then I'll just keep doing that. um,
Absolutely. I'm right with you.
I often think about, we would bring in scenes of, not just scenes, but larger chunks of plays that we would have rehearsed and brought in. And you would sometimes get up there and work with our actors and like instantly I could see all the problems that I made. And, you very graciously said like, well, you did all the foundational work for me. I just moved the walls a little bit. And yes, the floor plan was much better. Um, can you speak, because we've been talking about concept and the ideas before we even kind of get into the room. Can you talk about what it's like being in the room, the day to day, what it like beyond listening, which I know is such an incredibly important part that you harp on a lot. Can you talk about the day to day being the director in the room, working with the actor, like beyond staging? What is it that you're doing in the room daily?
Well, I think it's a process, and so at different points in the process, you're doing different things. Um, in the first part of the process, you're trying to figure out, okay, do we all agree on the direction that this might want to be going in? Does this seem reasonable? And you're trying to understand the context of the world. You're trying to world the place, just understand the world you're in. And then you're just trying to memorize the damn thing. You're trying to get the thing in your body. You're trying to memorize the blocking, memorize the lines, memorize the intentions. You're trying to put all this stuff in. And that's a point where the director has to be very patient, right? Just sort of lightly touch. Don't try to, do too much too soon. Just take your time, even if you have no time. And just but then something happens. Then at a certain point, the the play is no longer controlling the actor. The actor now has control of the play. And at that point, something very interesting happens. And that's when I think another level of work begins, which is what are we really dealing with? You know, sometimes you work on a play and you think, like, let's say we're hunters and we're going into our favorite metaphor, the forest, and it's like, I'm gonna catch myself a deer. That's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go in, I'm gonna shoot a deer, and I'm gonna come out. We're gonna have venison for dinner. And you go into the woods with this play. You spend 2 weeks in the woods, and you go, oh my God, it's a bear. You run out, trying to save your life, right? You just don't really know what you have, what it really is, until there's a certain amount of absorption time. So then suddenly you start to go, oh, this is what it is. And it might be very different from what you thought, what you talked about, but what all you thought and what you talked about got you to this place. And the creature has revealed itself. And now you have to shape the world around that creature. And then you have to shape it. And then you have to put it in front of an audience and say, did you see the creature? It was right behind that tree. Did you see it? And they go, no, didn't see it. And you go, okay, what do I have to do? Slow it down. Oh, I got to turn it this way, you know. And then during that preview process, you do that final little bit of work so that the play, is accessible to an audience. So I think you're doing different things at different times, and different parts of you get activated at different points. I think it's very easy to get sleepy. The hardest part of directing is you just take things for granted. You take things at face value. I'm sad. The character says, I'm sad. The character's sad. And you just move on. But you don't ask
Uh,
yourself, why is the character sad? What has, and how does the character feel about being sad? Because no one just is something. They have a feeling about their feeling. I like being sad, or I'm really angry that I'm sad. Do you know what I'm saying? So you have to stay awake to all these things, because the more awake you are to those things, the more alive they'll tend to be. So if there is a constant to directing, it's stay awake, stay awake. Don't fall asleep. Don't take things for granted. Just because the character says X doesn't mean there's a whole nother alphabet underneath that X or beside that X.
I love that. I talk about, actors have their warm-ups. They come into the room, they're already warm. Hopefully, they've done something to be ready for that. What is it that you need to do before you get into the room so that you can stay awake? I mean, is it just force of will? Is it just a really strong coffee? Like, what is it that you need? Because we usually are. We're running from meeting to meeting. You're traveling the subway or whatever. Like, is there a time that you need to kind of decompress before you get into the room so that you can stay constantly aware and awake to those questions?
I have a very non-intellectual answer, which is I listen
It's
to
great.
music.
Fantastic.
So I listen to music and I go, that's the play. That's the play. And it could be something like I'm directing, you know, years ago. So don't hold me to this. Years ago, I'm directing a production of Hamlet, and I was listening to Green Day,
Yeah.
and I went, that's the play. And so that energy, that when it got hot and heated, when it got quiet, all those songs were the play. And so when I was watching something, I would always say to myself, I can't, no, I don't hear it. I don't feel what I felt when I was listening. I want to feel Hamlet like I felt the album Green Day. And so that
Mhm.
became my way of staying awake, if that makes sense.
That's a great answer. It doesn't matter if it's intellectual or non-intellectual. Like, I know that I feel the same way. If I can't find, it used to be when I was an actor, like if I couldn't find the shoes, I couldn't play the part. Now, as a director, like if I don't know what the soundtrack to this is, and I'm not talking like somebody is literally composing it, but if I can't find that sound that I can just constantly loop into my head and find a way to make, yeah, I like that. Thank you for that. So you ran Classic Stage Company for over a decade. How long was it? 12 years?
It was an unfortunate 13 years. Unfortunate only by the number
Unfortunate.
13.
Okay. Not that it was a
Not
bad
not
time.
not
No.
that all 13 years were unfortunate. It ended on a bum number. It's like, really?
A bum
13?
number. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Can you give me one more? So you were leading the company alongside your work as a teacher at Columbia. You were also, when you started Columbia, you were still at the public. Is that right? You were, and then you switched
I
into
was in
CSC?
I was with an organization called the Shakespeare Society. I'd done the public and then I went to work for the Shakespeare Society, and then I got the CSC job and the Columbia job on the same day. I got two phone
Wow.
calls, and I
Wow.
and it was and I was like, "Can you do it?" And I said, "Sure." What did I know?
Was there a moment where you thought I need to choose one or the other, or like it was instantly like I can do both of these? Absolutely.
I had to do both because I couldn't afford it if I did one or the other. I needed the
Okay.
money from both to survive. So there was
Story of
nothing
a
deep or
theater.
intellectual. Yeah, it was like I need this to make a living. And one of the reasons why I was one of the longest artistic directors of CSC is because I had that support of a university,
Okay.
to I wasn't going hand to mouth so much.
What did and I know that you had been in leadership positions before, but what did leading an organization teach you that directing never could?
Well, there are different how you conduct yourself in a classroom is one way. How you conduct yourself in a rehearsal room is another way. How you conduct yourself in a boardroom is a third way. And one of the things I had to realize is that a boardroom is not a classroom, it's not a rehearsal room. It's its own unique, kind of difficult creature. And it has different rules and different expectations. And you have to, some of the things that make you a good director or a good teacher don't make you an effective person speaking to a board.
Uh,
So I had to learn a new set of rules. It was like learning about a new country. Oh, this is the way, this is the culture of this country. This is how they like to do things. I was dealing with a bunch of people who were primarily lawyers, and business people. And it's just not my world. It's not my world. It's not my reference points. So I had to sort of learn.
what was it? I know CSC's has a long run, and you weren't the second artistic director, even the third artistic director. But was it a bumpy first couple of years, like learning this new language, coming in
Oh,
and righting the
sure.
ship, or you know, yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. It took about 3 years to figure out how to both deal with the board and run the company. The theater had no money they didn't realize they had no money when I came in. We found out we had no money when I came in. This is a typical story. Almost every artistic director will tell you this. It's not specific to CSC. And I think after the first year they wanted to fire me. And I went out to lunch with the board president, and he said, there's a lot of people on this board who want to fire you. And so I said, I just got very angry, which I guess is one of the things that you have to do in these circumstances. I guess I don't know. And I said, you haven't given me the tools to do my job. So this failure is not my failure; it's our failure. And if you want me to do a good job, then you as a board president, need to, galvanize the people. We need to work together. I'm completely committed to this. I have no resources to work with. And the thing was, nothing that I said meant anything to this person. It was the way I said it. It was the emphaticness of it. It was the fire of it that he wrote back. He goes, "Oh, I'm so happy that you're." They were just happy that I was like I was on fire. That's what And then slowly things start to work. But the first couple, this is not a good analogy. It's a terrible analogy in terms of truth. But the first 3 years were like Vietnam. It was like that movie Platoon where Martin Sheen gets there and he thinks it's a really good idea to go to Vietnam, and then he lands, and 2 hours later he goes, "How do I get out of here?" That's exactly
right.
how I felt at CSC. It's
Wow.
like, where's the exit? Where's the exit door? It was just like, it was a lot.
But you stayed there and you were a fighter for it. And I'm asking this question because I'm asking as a question for younger people, kind of the hard truths about being an artistic leader that younger directors rarely ever hear. When I started this podcast, I wanted to not just talk about the successes of things and the ideas of things, but also like where there were hardships, real hardships, like the grinding out, like you said, 3 years of Vietnam. I'm sure you must have thought along the way, I can't do this. I don't want to do this. I shouldn't do this. Maybe I'm not the right person for this. But you stuck with it and pushed through, and then you saw maybe some light at the end of the tunnel. What what made you stay there? What made you think that I can write this ship. I am the person for this. I really am interested in that dip moment where Seth Godin says, you're in the dip, and the dip leads to, the valley leads to a new hill where we will come out of that. And most people give up in the dip. Can you talk about your Vietnam period a little bit longer?
Sure. But I'm having PTSD while I'm talking about it. I just want you to know
Sorry,
that.
I don't mean to bring
No.
it up.
That's quite all right. That's quite all right. I think, the job got easy when I realized not to be calculated and not to think about what should I program, but what do I want to program? What plays am I really, at the time, a small theater wasn't supposed to do Shakespeare. Only the public theater is supposed to do Shakespeare. It's like, I like doing Shakespeare. I want to do Shakespeare. I don't care if it's chamber. I don't care if it's, a small stage. I don't care if I have to, can't have a cast beyond 12 people. Shakespeare didn't have a cast beyond 12 people, you know. So, and then it's like, I like the Greeks. I love Chekhov. Why do I have to wait for the English people to come to BAM to do bad Chekhov? I mean, why do I have to watch the one culture that is so foreign to Russian behavior turn a Russian play into Noel Coward? Why do I have to watch that? And that is somehow held up by the New York Times as the gold standard of Chekhov performances. So I just started programming what I wanted to do, and I also started to realize that the theater was very small, so the acting became very important. And acting was always important to me, but suddenly I realized this place is going to rise or fall on the level of acting. And suddenly, once you start, if you build it, they will come. If you are truly doing a classical theater, not a calculated theater like, well, I only have so much money and I can only do this, and the New York Times likes this, so I better do that. If you clear all that out and you go, I love the cherry orchard, you're going to find people who love the cherry orchard and want to do it. In New York City, my God, and then suddenly they're banging down the doors. People want to do Uncle Vanya. They want to do the Seagull. They want to do Hamlet. They want to do those plays. Doesn't matter if it's in a little shoebox theater. It doesn't matter if they're only being paid. I can't even remember the embarrassing amount we paid human beings for their work. They did it because they loved it in the same way that I loved it. And so suddenly I realized, oh, this is a theater. This is truly a theater for theater rats. And I had to find a community of theater rats, and that included extraordinary people like John Turturro, Mandy Patinkin, F. Murray Abraham, Dianne Wiest, young people like Maggie Gyllenhaal, Peter Sarsgaard, Adam Driver, Jeremy Strong. These were all theater rats. They all loved theater above and beyond what it paid, how many days a week it was, where it was happening, blah, blah, blah. And the real remuneration are those relationships, is watching a great actor in a small room do their thing. Is so thrilling. That was better than the money. If you ask me what kept me in, what put me in was those artists and the audience's response to those artists. That's what kept me in.
And that's what I loved so much about it was, I think when I moved to New York in 2006, and I think 2007 was Seagull with Alan
that's where
Cumming, Dianne Wiest.
We started to turn the corner. Yeah.
And then it became my favorite place to kind of go. I love that area of town anyway, but I could go to CSC and then go to Momofuku, and it was just what was amazing at that time period. And you're like, oh my God, I'm 3 feet away from Dianne Wiest. Like, holy shit. Like, she's right there. Alan Cumming is about to touch my foot as he goes off stage because it's a small space.
Yeah. Right.
And to see, that and really go, normally I'd be paying $200 on Broadway to see this person do something and not have any access to this. But no, they're doing it for love. They really love the challenge of this. That's what I really appreciated that. And it taught me something about not being afraid to ask. Not being afraid to ask. What are they going to say? No. But to really kind of talk to them. I remember the day that you had gotten, I guess, the clearance or the grant for the new translation of the Oresteia, Anne Carson's translation, was also the day that Maggie Gyllenhaal signed up for Vanya. And it was I have these two things, and the abundance and the bounty that I have in this moment, and also like what's going to lead in the New York Times tomorrow is going to be this story versus like I'm really excited about this as well. And like what an amazing time that was. I think that was really some of my favorite theater when I was in the city with that. Without getting into specifics, there was a period in your leadership that involved public conflict. What did that period ask you to become personally and artistically in that time?
Well, I think you're referring to maybe Mother Courage, which was
Mm,
which, there's lots of conflict in the theater. Theater's made of conflict. And,
yeah,
sort of, one of my mentors, George C. Wolfe, said, "What do you want? You want to live? You know, it's, what's the point if it's just going to be a boring, mediocre thing? Roll the dice."
yeah, yeah, yeah,
He'd say, "Oh, there are difficult, sometimes the director would say, 'Oh, there's difficult people.'" He goes, "Yes, they're difficult because they're good. They're
yeah,
difficult because they're very good and they have very high standards and they know when things aren't working and they tell you." you know. So George was always like, "Do it." And that takes a strong nervous system. It's not as easy as it sounds. But there is a lot of conflict in the theater, and a lot of times it just stays within the walls. And this spilled out, and I have nothing but utmost respect to this day. I adore Tanya Pinkins. I think she's an extraordinary artist. Love her to death. I thought she show even when she left, there was so much of her in it and informed it. She had reasons to leave, and the thing that got me through it was the cast wanted to continue. They felt there was something there, and they wanted to have to be able to share it with an audience. Had the rest of the company not uh, felt that way. It was in some ways stronger than I did. It's like and really stepped up. Everybody stepped up, and it became. And that's what's always interesting. Crisis brings very interesting things. We had a situation where an actor got sick, and we thought the show was going to just be canceled because of their sickness. Thankfully, thank God, the actor was totally fine, no problem whatsoever. But the thought of that happening galvanized the company in a way. It's what made the company suddenly fuse together and give a transcendent set of performances. So sometimes adversity does very interesting things. It ruins your interior lining of your stomach, but it can lead to a really good production.
yeah. And as a very anxious person, I think about I got to see actually some of the preview performances before she left, and I thought, brilliant!
Yeah,
What a
absolutely.
phenomenal Mother
Absolutely.
Courage she would have been if everybody could have seen it. But just the way that it spilled over into the public, which was, that time period of social media really kind of jumping up and becoming something else to the point where like I was in Singapore reading the stories about, and I was just thinking, how do you keep the lining of your stomach and the integrity of protecting all artists, even one that you maybe are one that is in conflict with you. And I really thought that was a masterclass in class in that moment. And I'm appreciative that you're saying that you still think she's a phenomenal actress, even though there's differences.
Absolutely. It's good to have differences. Do you know what I'm saying? And I think,
Yeah,
maybe not the differences that we had, but
you're right.
it's incredibly healthy, and stuff happens, and it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart because I think uh Tanya was extraordinary, and she could sense she was going to be extraordinary in it. But there were things in the show
Yeah,
she just, had taken as I said, things manifest themselves. You don't know what you're working on until late in the process. And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
we got to something, and I went, I think this is what the thing is. And Tanya's like, "Oh, I think this is what the thing is." And we just had two different thoughts about what it is.
And I think it's a healthy thing to say, oh, okay, then that's not the show that I thought I was in, and I need to step away. Maybe not publishing, an op-ed or whatever, but like, I think difference is fantastic. I think we should celebrate difference, and the fact that you can say like, I can see that interpretation of Mother Courage. That's not the interpretation we're working on or that I'm interested in this moment, but I wish we could celebrate difference and diversity more in that way. And I'm a lot of the discussion came down to director and actor. And something we talk about on the podcast a lot, and it's something that Karim brought up recently, which is a director's not an interpreter. A director is a creator in their own right. Like the play is literature, and somebody has to make that visual. Somebody has to put that into a space. And in that transition from here to here, choices have to be made. And just like translation, when you're translating something, it is the ultimate betrayal because choices have to be made and things are going to be changed.
If I can interject one thing, what if you
Please,
don't mind,
please do.
what you're
Please.
asking, it sort of sounds similar to, my friend Michael Potts, a spectacular actor, who was in Mother Courage. He said, Brian, basically what you're doing is you're doing, it's like you're just producing workshops. You know, everything you're doing should have this long gestation period. The problem that you fell into was you're producing workshops, and sometimes the workshop works and sometimes it doesn't work, you know and that's just so to a certain extent, we're discoverers. I don't know if we're creators or we're interpreters, but we certainly discover stuff. And sometimes what we discover is, oh, this is the wrong path, and sometimes we discover this is a path I never anticipated, but this is the way it's got to go. And that's part of what's thrilling and absolutely mortifying about the job. It's equal. When it works, it is so thrilling. And when it doesn't work, it is so painful. And then you add politics to it, and then you add identity to it, and then you add all these other things that are very meaningful to all of us. Oh my goodness. It's a recipe for a very strong possibility for success and a possibility for hurt.
So is that the byproduct of the American theater, short time period, rehearsrsal equity, or is that universal to,
I don't know.
Russia, who has 6 months?
Don't know. I'm if it's like the difference between playing a long game of chess and speed chess. All I know is speed chess. That's all. You had to play speed chess at Columbia. Americans are good at speed chess. It's like, I don't know how to play a lot. I wouldn't know what to do with 6 months. I would just go insane. I only know how to do something. It's like, what do you want from me for 6 months? Leave me alone. That's too long.
I don't know how to make a show with $2 million. I only know how to make a show with $15,000.
Yeah. What? You've got surplus? You can change things?
Yeah.
What are you, crazy? That's not theater.
Do you imagine yourself leading another organization again, or has your sense of how you're most useful now shifted?
Oh, I am very glad that I ran a theater. I have lots of feelings about it. I have lots of good feelings about the artists and the audiences. I have a lot of bad feelings about it, because I think the American system and the idea that we cede so much power to boards who don't know anything about the idea of the not-for-profit is really kooky.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's modeled on is a whole nother podcast. And I have very strong feelings about that. And I don't think it's a system works. I don't think it works. And I think we're seeing now more and more that it doesn't work. It's wrong. It doesn't work, and it's dying. So if I wanted to go back, I couldn't go back because I think the system is broken and people aren't ready to fix it. So if you want my honest answer, I wouldn't go back because I'm too old to go back. Running a theater is a young person's job and should be a young person's job. You don't need an Alta Cocker doing stuff. It should be this generation that is inheriting these theaters now. Aaron Arbus, Patricia McGregor. This is the right. That's the age. Those are the people who should be running theaters. Elir Devosnay. These are the people who should be running theaters, not Brian Kulick.
Thank you for saying that. Although I could have you run a theater all the time, we talk often, just me and my colleagues in my class, of saying like, because we were in New York when it was the third generation of artistic directors. And it's the second generation that are there for a very short period because they don't live up to the first generation directors. So they're very kicked out very quickly. And then the third generation holds on for dear life, and you have to claw them out, and they become the gatekeepers. And we were talking about, like, we're not going to get an opportunity to be leaders because it's going to bypass us to the generation below us. Not that we were complaining. I'm very happy to have done my own thing, but I'm also very happy to see Aaron Arbus and Lear and everybody else kind of stepping in and having that voice. What do you think that they owe to the moment that we're in? And I know that the moment is always a moment, but when as you're saying, the nonprofit regional theaters, they are failing, as the economic model is failing, as democracy seems to be on the ropes as well. What do we owe to this moment in terms of people are not ready to dismantle the nonprofit system, but there's also nothing seemingly in its place coming up. So what do we do? Brian, how do we save this?
Well, people always ask me, why are you so damn optimistic about the theater? Why are you? It's because of being at Columbia, I have a sneak preview of the next generations of theater makers, and you and your class and the classes that followed you and Kareem's class. These are amazing artists, who work in the system, work outside the system, make their own system. We've had all different kinds of directors, but there is no paucity of talent and vision. That is not the problem. The problem is not the vision. The problem is the delivery system. And the delivery system needs to be rethought, and it needs to be taken over by the artists themselves. We have to stop being children, and we have to say to mommy and daddy, you're not my mommy, you're not my daddy, you're a business person, you don't know what you're doing. Go away. Give me your money if you want to give me your money, but get out of my business. It's really, in a way, that simple. And then the delivery system can change. The great, extraordinary thing about theater is it's actually really inexpensive to do. Now, Broadway is another, there are costs, there are unions, and there should be unions, but theater is relatively inexpensive. And you're talking about, models like doing a play in a brownstone. I think that there are so many site-specific. I think there are so many different delivery systems that are so much more interesting than going to CSC during my term. And that's thrilling. Unfortunately, we have to do that because the system that we have isn't working. But we should be doing it anyway because it's time for new venues, new methodologies. The mode of production really is the big issue of theater making in the 21st century. There is a question about there's mode of production. There's also like a new compact with an audience. It's like what is we are operating on models of what we think an audience wants, which are also wrong. And so I think we have to rethink the compact with the audience, and we have to rethink the mode of production. And once we do that, and we're already in the process of doing that, it'll be fine. Because the vision and the grammar of theater and the inventiveness of your generation, other generations is totally there.
When you go to see a show now, what do you want? I mean, beyond the entertainment value or the great acting or maybe even the lesson, to speak to this moment of modes of production, what is it that, when you think of something that's like floored you or thought like, holy shit, why can't theater be more like this? What's happening to you? What's happening in the audience in those kind of things where it's not just like, oh, okay, another show behind a proscenium? Can you speak to that? Like, what is it that like sneak peek preview of like, I wish it could be more, not all, but more like this. This is the direction that is fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, this comes down to taste, and so, you have taste, I have taste. Everyone who's listening to this podcast have their taste. What excites me is experiences where I feel first and I think second, where I feel a thought and I think a feeling, where the thing is confused, where I'm just smacked with something, and I'm sort of like literally struck, hit, not lectured to, but just like emotionally impacted, and I don't know what to do because most of my life is like very very compartmentalized and very polite and color within the lines, and then to suddenly be smacked with something like Blasted, by Sarah Kane. It's like, how do you process that? How do you do that? What is happening to me? Is a very interesting place to be, and it's like a roller coaster ride. So for me, I don't like to be lectured to. I don't need a lecture. I know the world sucks.
Hmm.
I need to be woken up. I need to not woken up to feel bad about myself. I need to be woken up to appreciate that life is worth living. And I need to be woken up to the possibility of humanness, which is infinite, and that I shouldn't strive for less. I should strive for more. So to me, the best kind of theater is wake up, but not in a woke sense, although it's a very important movement, absolutely necessary movement. But I'm talking about something that is to wake up the totality of the person in the moment, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does, absolutely. So I always ask this question, but this is such a great segue to it, which is one of my students asked me this question before, in between showings of something, and it floored me because I don't think she meant it to be such a deep question, but I couldn't answer it in the moment. And I always ask this of artists. So what is a show that you have seen that changed you, that obviously every single show changes us in some way, but literally there was Brian Kulick before you watched the show and there was Brian Kulick after you watched the show, and that either as an artist or as the human being, you could not operate your life in the same way after seeing this production?
I've been very fortunate to have several of those experiences in my life. Very early in my life, I think I was in high school, there was a theater, very short-lived theater in Long Beach called the Terrace Theater. And I think it was called the Terrace Theater. It was a professional theater company. And we got a season subscription. And the last show was Our Town. Our Town is kind of like, oh my goodness, Our Town. Okay. Even as a high school student, I knew, really? Our Town? Come on. What are you talking about? Can't you think of something a little bit, newer than Our Town? And so we went to see it. It was going to be with Eddie Albert, who was a television actor who had done, I think, a TV series with a dolphin, Flipper or something like that. Anyway,
Flipper.
so he
Oh
was going to be
God, yeah.
he was going to be the stage manager.
Stage
and I was
manager.
just dreading it. Yeah, and I was just dreading
Yeah.
this. Even as a high school student, I knew this was a recipe for disaster. We arrived, and it turned out that Eddie Albert was shooting a film and couldn't get released in time for that performance. So his son, uh, Edward uh, Jr., played the role with, thankfully, the stage manager. He had the prompt book in his hand. You don't have to memorize lines if you're the stage manager. You're the stage manager. You have the stage manager's book. It tells you where to walk. It tells you what to say. And what was genuinely moving was watching this person discover the play at the same time the audience was discovering it, and being moved at the same time I was being moved. And suddenly I was watching, as an audience member, I was watching what it means to be an audience, what happens to an audience. And I was watching it. I was like reverse. It was like turn the telescope around and look on the other end. And suddenly I was watching audienceness, audience-shipness. But that theater does change you. It changed Edward Albert Jr. He was so overwhelmed by the third act of that play. I think it's 3 acts. I don't know. It seems like 3 acts if it isn't. By the way, I love this play. It's one of my favorite plays because of this performance.
Same.
And he was crying. He couldn't get through the damn thing because he was too emotionally overwhelmed by it. And he apologized. He said to the audience, "I'm so sorry." And someone in the back yelled, "No, it's good you feel this way." And and it was beautiful. It's like, this is what theater is. And even recounting the story now, I start to tear up. So that was a really foundational thing. And the fact that it has stayed with me, I was like, 14 years old, and I'm talking about it now. I'm 64 years old. And I'm still talking about this moment. The feelings that I felt come rushing back in the same way when you hear a song that you haven't heard for a long time and your whole life comes back. It has left a trace in me, uh, and it has grown. It's probably my memory of this performance is so much better than what it actually was, because your memory,
Yeah.
refines things and deepens them over time. So, and then I had a similar experience watching Carol Churchill's The Striker, where
Mm,
I was in pain. I was literally in pain. I was watching the production, and I also had this experience with I won't. Anyway, it was an absolute total pain. And the thing was, I remember every moment of that show. I've seen shows that I liked and enjoyed, and I can't tell you what happened. But that show actually had I remember every moment, and now every moment is profound. It taught me something very important about the avant-garde. The avant-garde isn't about the moment you're seeing it. It's about what happens afterwards. It's about a
yeah.
threshold. Um, it's about you're held at a point where you can't get satisfaction, and you have to live within that and tolerate that and understand that, live with it, and then after the work starts to work on you after the fact. That's what Duchamp says. He calls art the delay. It's a delay. The avant-garde is the delay, and it's actually can be more powerful than the things you supposedly like.
Mhm.
So yeah, so I've had a lot of these different kinds of experiences of the phenomenology of what it means to experience theater, because it's different from watching a movie. It's different from watching a television show, because it can fail more. So the stakes of it are very different.
Yeah. Yeah. I always I always despised Richard Foreman for that kind of thing of like I hated sitting in like, that's space was always so tiny, and like he was sitting right there doing the sound design right next to you, and I hated what you're doing with the actors, but I had the most amazing sleep every single night, the most lucid dreams, and I was always so mad that like he could do this to me. And it wasn't until, as you said, started once I stopped dismissing what was happening and just lived with it, knowing that later on, this is not for now. I'm downloading this to process this tomorrow or 3 weeks from
Yes,
now or many many years from now, as I'm sure you're talking about. You get the great joy of being in the classroom and seeing, as you said, the kind of the future of things. And I'm sure there's plenty of things I can name for myself of just like I put a lot of crap in front of you,
good
and maybe
stuff.
you'll eventually it got okay. The things that I felt proud of by the end, but boy, that first semester. Um, but so you're seeing a lot of directors come through, and you're friends with so many directors and have seen so many things. Who are you excited by? We're like, this is a long way of saying like, who should I invite on the podcast? Can you give me names of people that like, if I could see their work, I will go see their work, or you should look into what they're doing because that's some exciting stuff that is challenging, fascinating, good, emotional, deep, profound. What's exciting you? Whose work is exciting you now?
It's this question is hard because whenever you answer it, you leave someone out and they
Of
call
course,
you up.
yes, I know, I know.
Or they don't call they or actually they don't call you up. You bump into them, you realize, oh my God, I didn't mention them.
Yeah,
How
I
could
know.
I have done that? How could I have done that? What's the matter with me? So if you ask me, like we've had yourself, your class, you know, we just have had extraordinary directors come through. You should interview all of them.
I'm trying to.
Yes, yeah, 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 yeah. I mean, obviously there are a couple who right now uh have reached a moment where more people are aware of them, which is exciting, so that we have people like Sahim Ali, who, interestingly enough, for what, this is just anecdotal and probably is only interesting to me, but the first play that Sahim saw when he came to New York was my production of Twelfth Night at the Public Theater in the Delacorte. And then he just did 12th Night in the Delacorte, and his was so much better than mine. Oh my God, his was really good, you know.
I got to watch it on
But
PBS.
and it was like, wow, my wife says, let's go see this. Like, oh, do I have to? I don't, I've done the play. Do I have to go see it? You have to see it, Sahim. And it was just extraordinary. So there's something really exciting about, just being around long enough to see someone, that you love do the play that you did so much better than you. It's a very fascinating, and also better because it's so in tune with the moment. That's, directing, we age out, like I can do a certain kind of thing, and probably audiences would be fine with it. But I can't do what you do. I can't do what Sahim does. I can't do what Rachel Chafin does. I can't do what Misha does. I can't. It's not my generation. And I always used to like look at pictures and go, "Oh, that's so 70s, or that's so 60s." And it's like, "Oh, that's so 2006." That's what about my theater, It's like ties, my tie is wider than your tie. Your tie is cool. My tie is a little too wide, or a little too thin. It's not. Do you know what I'm saying? And but it's beyond fashion. It's about being in touch with the moment, and that's what when you talk about the speed of theater. Theater works best when it's in sync with its moment, right? So when I watch Sahim's production of Twelfth Night, I'm seeing him, the people he loves, the things he loves, the way his generation moves through the world, how they interact with one another. And it's gorgeous and it's glorious. And it's so nice to see that on stage, to see that generation express itself. So, and that's part of the fun. It's really a pain in the ass for people like me who's aged out, but it's really fun, for an audience to see themselves, to go,
Mm-hmm.
finally I'm on stage, god damn it. Excuse my language,
Yeah.
but for them to go, this is my zeitgeist. This is the spirit. This is it. And it's exciting for me to see because it's like I said to Sahim, I couldn't do that. And Sahim goes, yeah, Oscar said the exact same words. Oscar and I came up at the same time.
Yeah.
Oscar goes, I couldn't do that. I couldn't do that. It's like so that baton, that sort of passing from one generation to the next, is really exciting to see. But there's an army of Sahim Alis, out there ready to go. Again, as Rachel Chafin says, the pipeline is the problem. The supply is there. It's the delivery system that needs some fixing.
Yeah. Well, thankfully, you have been at the spigot of the pipeline for a long while now. And again, I'm just going to sing your praises. I talked about this in the last podcast of every single one of my classes ends with questions, concerns, conundrums. And my students now repeat this back to me as if I've invented it. And so there's a lineage that is going on and on and on. And you really have supported, instructed, lifted up, opened doors for, and opened minds for generations. And I cannot express how thankful I am for you to come on and share your thoughts with us today. I'm buzzing, and I'm so appreciative of having met you, worked with you, and having you in my life as a colleague now, not just as teacher.
Yes, most definitely.
Thank you, Brian. Thank you for coming on the podcast. Thank
you. My pleasure.
If this episode gave you any insight, inspiration, or even just made you smile, please subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts for more conversations like this. And if you're looking for guidance with a creative challenge or want to advance a dream of your own, we'd love to help. Visit boardofdirectors.world. The Board of Directors is a global constellation of theater directors dedicated to building community, sharing knowledge, and transforming the role of the director in the 21st century. We convene and curate a fellowship that fosters mentorship, artistic inquiry, and collective care, transcending borders and institutions and traditions. Until then, take care of yourself and take care of each other.